End of the day in the studio once more. I tend to spend a lot of time in the studio. I think that there are very few videos I've done that are not in the studio, and I am presenting the Word. I am working on a painting that is a sculpture, that is a painting, and it's the Word. I'm going to give the Word and in my studio at the end of the day. And what I was thinking, reflecting on, is that we all know, and I've said this before, we honestly, we all know. We all know. Everyone that has, I don't know what it is that makes me convinced that everything that is occurring at every moment of every day is completely known to all of us. And we attach ourselves to people that give us the information. It's valuable. No, I don't discard information, things that I'm being told to my conscious mind. It's important, yes, to be told things, to be educated, to be involved in this activity of thinking about stuff. But we all know. We're going through tremendous upheavals in our psyche. What I consider to be consciousness, which is everything, is undergoing a major upheaval. And the reason it's going through this upheaval is because what I refer to continuously whenever I talk about stuff as conscience has been ignored probably, well, as far back as you want to go. You go historically, whatever you believe to be history, you go back and you see all the mayhem and the suffering and all the stuff that goes down is because people go along, they are compliant, even though they know deep down that it's not the right thing to do. So when I always refer to the inner war, it's basically about the fact that we have capitulated on our birthright, which is the ability to do the right thing. And I'm not even talking about a calling. I'm not even invoking the idea that you're going to be brilliant in any way that you're capable of being. Each person has a calling which is absolutely magnificent. Imagine that. 7 billion callings unfolding in a continuous way. We'd be so enlightened. We'd be like floating. We'd be teleporting like Star Trek into another dimension, into another sphere, into another whatever. So, like, I'm just going to reflect a little bit today to give the word on that we all know. We all have an innate understanding of what's going on. And I was just listening to a fairly lengthy dissertation by Freeman Fly. Freeman Fly is somebody I enjoy quite a bit, and he posted a video recording of Myron Fagan, who went through the entire litany of how the Illuminati, which is a misnomer, Illuminati, these are just self-gratifying rat bastard reptilian fuckers who are just running the show whichever way they feel like they want to do it, and we all know they are. We all know. We just like close our eyes and we say, well, you know, let them do it as long as I have my Twinkie or whatever it is that you're attached to that you really enjoy, and your coffee, and you get to go to work and be a slave for most of your life, and you retire and you hope to have enough money to live on, but then of course cancer happens and you have to liquidate all your assets and you have no money left, and when you're 75 or 80, you get shipped off into an old age home. They mistreat you. We just had another incident near where I am, where an old age home nurse decided to kill like a bunch of the old people because she killed them, yeah, and they didn't figure it out until 9 or 10 had been killed. So this is something we all know. So when you're listening to presenters, and I do like a few of the presenters on YouTube, even though it's slim pickings, I do appreciate some of the presenters. I want to draw attention to this fellow Quantum of Conscience. I love his icon. The name Conscience is in his icon. Matt guy. He's a very down-to-earth person, and he unravels a lot of the things for us that we already know. But he does have an added aspect to him that he creates a context, which is what I also like. He just doesn't regurgitate the information. He's actually presenting us, creating through his own inner self a context of giving you something that you don't know. This is very important. What you don't know is when I make a painting, what I infuse my work, whatever it is that you see behind me in most of my videos, this is something you don't know, especially if I'm able to transcend this experience through my originality. There are things that you don't know. Obviously, there are influences in my work that, yeah, I'm influenced. I love other people's work. In my extended family of artists, I enjoy. I am enriched by what has come before me. But again, we all know. And what I present to you in my art is something you don't know. And that is the context through my own inner work that I have, to the extent that I've been able to do it or accomplish this aspect of myself, to do the inner work, which is actually the thing that prevents us from being able to understand what it is we're going through. We know what we're going through, but we don't understand it. It's the fact that people like Trump, who pretends to be one of the clan of us, the common folk, I am on your side. I am just a poor slob like all the rest of you, slugging away. Well, this is the furthest thing from the truth, but we all know this already. We don't have to go through this. We don't have to listen to Fagan talk about how the so-called Illuminati have actually destroyed the very psyche of our nature, of our being, by taking it upon themselves for the purpose of self-gratification, to enrich themselves at our expense. This is something we all know, but we go along with it. We go along with it. So what's the point? What's the point if we all know? Why are you listening to me? Why are you listening to anybody on this platform? Because you already know anyway. You already know. And I've got my book with, I ad-lib this, I kind of go on, I talk about stuff. And I'm thinking about this, Myron Fagan talking about the nature of the Masonic, the hijacked Masonic lodges. Apparently, in his opinion, the Masonic lodges were infiltrated by what are called the Illuminati, which are people that basically are completely self-centered, self-gratifying pricks, bastards, mostly guys. I don't know why, but for some reason I give a lot of credit here to women because they don't get involved in this. Maybe 99% are the guys, and the women, I suppose they may support their leader if they attach themselves to a man who's running the show, they support it and all that. Yes, you can become complicit in it as well as a woman, but it's generally speaking the guys who run the show. So what's the point, And I was listening to Lonnie Clark's radio show, UCY TV, and she interviewed Guy McPherson. And this was interesting to me because here's a person who says we got less than 10 years, probably 8 years before everything disappears. And I had to kind of chuckle because this is a notion. This has always appeared. This rears its head when we're going through major difficulties in our understanding, certain people kind of pop up and they create the end times thing. And I have to admit that I'm inclined towards giving this person a lot of credit, because the end of times is not what he says, not what he says, but what I've been talking about in terms of Fukushima. And it's not just it's not just one thing that is actually breaking the camel's back here. Fukushima is the jewel in the crown of this incredible technology gone amok. And we all know. So what's the point? I'm telling you, we all know that this plant has blown up and it's being completely ignored by mainstream media just to placate, which is another aspect of our culture. Our culture either creates spectacle or it placates, and it placates through spectacle. Wow, fabulous. So I was listening to this fellow Guy McPherson say, and he's very reasonable about the whole thing, and says, well, you know, live your life with a sense of yourself in some way, rather than adopting some exterior, some formula that is not originating in our own self, in terms of what we feel to be our calling, what it is we really want to do. Do we want to work every day and overtime to create a tax base for this oligarchic system that Fagan goes into very well? He, at the end of this Freeman video, I think I'll attach it, it was quite informative, but he capitulates completely because he goes back into his Christian shell. He invokes Christianity. That's a whole other story. In this pagan religion called Christianity being held up, it's a battle between the Christians and the Muslims, and it's the white against the colored people, and white man is being decimated by the onslaught of the Muslim, the brown people, and all of this stuff. We all know. This is the dialectics that are being proposed to us that are going to take us down, and everything is like at the end of time. Just like McPherson says, we're at the end of time. Carbon, you know, stop breathing out your damn carbon, people. You're all carbon CO2 producers. You're all toxic beings for breathing carbon. And carbon is ruining everything. Carbon emissions. You're a major carbon emitter, and you should be stopping you know what? Just check yourself in, like Soylent Green, Edgar G. Robinson on the table, volunteering for his own demise while he sees the deer skipping through the idyllic landscape. Yes, why don't you check yourself in and just say, yeah, I'm a sick, disgusting, toxic being producing the carbon that's destroying the planet. What a ridiculous, what a scenario they've managed to create in people's minds. How absolutely ridiculous this is. And our Mr. McPherson is talking about, well, here is the issue. I'm not sure whether he was saying it's anthropogenic or it's just like a cyclical event that happens over millions of years on the earth and everything is destroyed and we have an extinction going on. Which one is it? Guy, which one is it? Is it an extinction because we're dirty bastards, or is it because we're in a cyclical sun event, which is producing over the next decades an ice age? We're cooling. So the idea of the methane being released because the Arctic won't have any ice. Yes, the ice is melting, but we're heading into an ice age, which will create ice over the northern continent probably, and we won't be able to grow food and blah, blah, blah. The whole thing is so convoluted the way it's being presented, the information, and you and I know, we all know, it's a bunch of fucking hooey. That's what we know. What we are not admitting to ourselves is the part that we play in it. That I give credit to Guy talking about this, because we're not willing to admit what part we have in producing or in creating this instability in our experience. It's always been like that. And the idea of threatening people with the ultimate annihilation of the destruction of everything When has threat ever worked to get people inspired? It's never worked. Inspiration does not work based on threats. Threats do not work. McPherson, threats do not work. And you are presenting a threat. The idea of everything is over in the next 10 years is a threat. People perceive this as a threat, and they will withdraw into their shell, and they will remove themselves from what it is that they already know. So stop it. Stop it. It's my thought. That's what I think. So here we are, my dissertation today, at the end of day, giving you the word that we know. We all know. And it's not a question of how much more information you can add to your plate, to your pot. It's running over, people. Your pot is running over. What is lacking, what is absolutely empty. You're in the sense of we are all empty plates as a species, because we're not willing to do what I say is the inner work that will resolve whatever the external world appears to us. The external world is actually not what we think it is. It appears a certain way because we haven't done the inner work. We haven't done that soul searching that is required to look at the word in a true way, to actually absorb that, the word, that which is happening all around us, to truly internalize this and identify this within our own way. How do we interpret the reality that's out there? And the people that are presenters that are telling us all the news, as no news is good news, as I say, they're presenting us with the news, and we have enough of the news. This is what I say. We have enough of the news. We need the context. We need to be able to relate to something that makes sense to us personally, not something that is established from outside. We need to create our own stories, people, honestly. This is why I make paintings, because I want to present my story, because I think it's a lot better than the shit that you're hearing or seeing anywhere else. And this is like a nice little add-on I'll just give. I suppose, I think I've made my point. I've said the word. I'm going to add a little story at the end of this, and that is people who've been keeping track of me know how I feel about our culture, what I call the culture of death. And one of the proponents that is highly exalted within our culture of death is an artist called Koons. What's his first name? Whatever. Koons, K-O-O-N-S. Check him out. He made a proposal to Paris, the city of Paris, that they could have, he's gifting a sculpture of a very realistic looking hand with one of his goofy tulip things that are basically balloon representations. He's the guy that did the balloon dog, and it's highly stylized. You know how you bend balloons and you twist them in a knot, and he's made sculptures. He hasn't made a thing. He hasn't touched anything in the last 30 years of his life. He shops it out to industrial manufacturers. He has ideas because he's so brilliant. Anyway, he said, Paris, you can have the sculpture of a hand sticking out of the ground, holding his bogus, stupid tulips. And this is beautiful. This is beautiful. You can get this. Go to Hyperallergic, and they'll have the story on Koons. Rejected by the city of Paris. Well, anyway, rejected by these are. I have a little hope again in the curators and art types that are part of the system of this culture have said, we don't want your stupid sculpture in our city. This is a major event. And all the collectors that have been collecting art by the propagated artists, those fabulous people like Damien Hirst or Schnabel, or people like Jeff Koons is his name, people that are promoted in this culture, they will all have major financial losses. Their work will be recyclable. They're going to melt down whatever it is that is meltdownable, or it'll be recycled. This is what will happen in the future for these artists. I am convinced that the Koons and the Schnabels and the Damien Hirst and There's a whole slew of these people that have been populating our general consciousness as being brilliant and fabulous, like this Ai Weiwei guy, or Murakami. These people are not going to be holding their value because they're attached to something which is fundamentally decrepit and degenerate. And it won't work. It can't work. It can't work. You have to create something of value to people's psyches. And if they're not quite on board yet, it may take 50 years, like Vincent painting his paintings. Yes, after 50 years, people finally caught on. But, you know, the people that are now alive and have been for the last 20 or 30 years benefiting in great quantities of money from the work that they produced, isn't it really suspect to you that people in their own time are so successful? This has never been part of our history because we kind of tend to lag behind things. Anyway, it was a great story. Go to Hyperallergic. I'll attach it at the bottom of this video. And it's a great story how they rejected this artist. And recently, Damien Hirst had a huge show in Venice on some shipwreck thing that he did, which was just brutal. It was absolutely brutal. So this is unfolding now, and we all know it's just a matter of, are we going to make the right choices in our lives and create the optimism that is required to get us through the Guy McPherson thing about us being the culprits. And if we're not the culprits, if we're in like a 60 million year cycle, like the dinosaurs are completely eradicated 60 million years ago, supposedly, this had nothing to do with SUVs and CO2 produced by bloody beer-drinking mammals, as Blanche says. This is something that is entirely part of a cyclical event that we have no control over. So if that is going to happen and the methane goes through, the methane is released because the ice melts, it's more likely the ice is going to come back over the next few years big time in an ice age, which is going to create a whole other issue. And the people that have been promoting CO2 warming are full of shit. They are full of shit because you and I are not toxic beings. We produce CO2, which is beneficial to the ecosystem. This is the omnipotent being figured out that if we breathe out CO2, we're going to help everything else around us, not destroy everything. So what you and I produce as CO2 is not going to cause the end. It's the nefarious elements among us that are trying to take over our calling, our birthright. They're trying to displace us from what it is that we're truly capable of doing. And let's not give them that. That's what I'm saying. And I'm on side with McPherson to live your life in the best possible way with that caring, that generosity, that spirit that is within us. But you don't get that unless you act your conscience and you do the right thing. I always come back to this. So my end-of-day dissertation, and there's the word. I've just given it to you.